the best outcomes tend to come from things that like 30 people said no to, but this one person was like, I think you're great. And that's a crazy idea. As you progress in your career in venture, I think you have more people who want you to win. So the early days of making your first investment, you don't have like this like group of 30 founders who all want you to win as much as you want them to win. It was a very intimidating environment to go into. I think I should have spoken up more.
Hi everyone, I'm Taiki and you're listening to New to Venture. It's the show that uncovers the secret world of venture capital. From the multi-billion-dollar exits to the biggest company blow-ups, if you don't know that much about VC, you've come to the right place. It's time to get hyped because the one and only Chauncey Kerr Hamilton has joined us on the show today. Usually, I give an introduction on the guest's background, but Chauncey has such a unique journey that I figured the only way to do it justice is by letting her give it herself. So Chauncey, your path to venture is not conventional at all. Where did it all start?
My path to venture is not conventional. And I think a lot of people kind of make it into venture in a non-conventional way. But I started my career actually at Thrillist, the early stage media company, when I first graduated from college, which was started by Ben Lair, who's the managing partner of Lair Hippo. So actually even though it was non-conventional, it's like venture was very early in my journey. So I always loved early stage startups and even interned at an early stage startup when I was in college, which was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth. So it's not something like people who listen to New to Venture would know about. I loved early media. And so that led me to Wired magazine and Wired.com. They invented the banner ad way back when. So Wired was actually a very interesting place to be from a technology and startup vantage point. Everyone there just loved the future. And so it was a very cool group of people, whether it was writers or people on the business side. And so I spent a lot of time there and was lucky to work sort of cross-functionally with the business side and editorial on all sorts of special projects was my last role there. The thing that led me to venture there was my best friend at Wired, who I sort of followed her career trajectory, is this woman, Kat Manyalik, who's a partner at Y Combinator. But Kat left Wired and joined Alexis Ohanian as his chief of staff.
Wow. Wait, was this at Reddit or is this at 776?
It was in between Reddit and in between Initialize when Alexis was kind of doing a few projects on his own. And Alexis actually worked, when he was at Reddit, Condé Nast, the owner of Wired, also owned Reddit. So I knew Alexis from the early days too. Yeah, it was an amazing group of people. Anyway, Kat joined YC and she at the time moved back to California and she kept sending me jobs at different startups. And eventually she ran into this woman, Tammy Hahn, who's a partner at Emergence Capital now, but was at the time working at First Round Capital. And she was looking to hire a chief of staff for Rob Hayes, one of the partners at First Round. So it was a chance encounter that Kat and Tammy met, but Kat was like, oh, you should talk to my friend Chauncey about that role. And 3 weeks later, I was packing my bags, knew very little about venture, but left New York to join First Round in 2013 in San Francisco. So I was very lucky. I give a lot of credit to amazing people in my life who've just sort of put me on different paths. But that's how I entered venture.
Yeah, wow. And so you were the chief of staff or partner at First Round?
Yes. So at the time it was called partner operations manager, which is a silly title. But I think they've since rebranded it to the chief of staff role. And I probably should rebrand it myself, but essentially they were just experimenting with this role. And that's one thing that First Round does amazingly well, is that they just experiment with a lot of things. Like the First Round review was an experiment, building out platform was experiment, starting dorm room fund was an experiment. And one other of those experiments was, what if we hired a chief of staff to essentially work one-to-one with one of the partners and sort of work across all the functions that they do. So investing, due diligence, memo writing, portfolio support, any special projects, which we already know that's the name of the game of the things I like to do. And anyway, I got to work with Rob Hayes, who's a brilliant investor. He led the seed round in Uber.
Yeah.
He invested in Square, Planet Labs, all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah. And so I got to sort of be Rob's ride or die for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years inside first round.
We're going into your past. I actually want to take a break, talk about some
Okay.
fun stuff, and then we'll go right back into it.
Let's do it.
Before we actually started the recording, we had a call about a few weeks ago, and we were talking about gardening, how this is something that you had liked doing. You like growing vegetables in your backyard. Do you have the goal of running a mini farm to table restaurant for the kids? Like, where is this all coming from?
Oh, I have like grand visions of like chicken coops and like all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
All sorts of stuff that I'm like not equipped to do whatsoever. But gardening actually started during my Thrillist days. So and it's actually, sorry to go back to the past, but I graduated in 2009 again when the dinosaurs were roaming. And it was a really wonderful economy to graduate into, and I say that with all the sarcasm in the world. But I lived at home and I commuted into the city, and I was fortunate enough to live on Long Island and like work at Thrillist, but like I needed like a hobby outside of commuting and like running and playing sports, etc. And for whatever reason, my dad's a gardener. His mom's an avid gardener. Like our family sort of like always had that sort of family activity.
The genetics. Yeah.
Yeah. I think my great grandmother might have even written a book on gardening. And so anyway, it's like I love spending time outside. Gardening, you can mess up a ton. And there's some good feedback loops, both short and long term. Like you have a growing season of like annuals or that you're growing a vegetable garden. Are the cucumbers successful? Who knows? Like only time will tell. But then if you're looking even for things like planting a tree or like all that stuff, that can be over a really long time horizon. So in many ways, it's like a nice I think parallel to venture of like short. There's some short feedback loops. There's some stuff you really screw up, and then there's some long feedback loops, which hopefully you made that decision right 7 years ago, God. Right? So
that's so funny. And your garden's like a portfolio of these long-term.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was thinking recently, for some reason, everything in my life, it always comes back to venture and investing, because really everything is about investing your time and your effort, right? And it's understanding like, is the cost of running this experiment or the cost of investing my time and effort into something worth the potential reward of it? And so I find that a lot of the frameworks that I use to think about investments, I actually end up like living my life through those frameworks, and it's a weird parallel, but I've kind of just started to embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, and the constraints too there that they create, right?
Yeah.
So, and even just thinking through like time and where we're all investing our time. I've been in venture for 12 years now, and when we talk about like your younger self in venture, like I took for granted for how much time I had. Because now I'm a mother of 3, and as you progress in venture, I think you are always have that like learning mindset of there's always more to learn on the job. And then there's more responsibility as you sort of progress in your venture career. If you start a fund, you own LP relationships, you're managing the actual team, et cetera. And so I talk a lot with like our internal team around the constraints you create for yourself around time management, knowing that venture in general tends to be very chaotic. Like you have no idea that today you're going to have to blow up your whole day because something's fast moving. With jealousy, I say it's a young person's industry for sure, because there I think less constraints on time.
Yeah. Wait, I'd actually love to dive into that. What are some best practices for time constraints?
I was gonna say children are
Yeah, I was gonna, yeah, that
not
too.
not to go full pro-natalist Elon Musk. Like I joke a lot that I'm like with 3 children, I'm becoming the female equivalent of Elon Musk. There's actually a mom's VC chat group called
Yeah.
Three Kids, Three Curious is the subgroup. It's like such a good group chat. I can't tell you enough. But anyway, so children tends to be a great constraint. And figuring out how to incorporate your children into your work life because venture and personal professional blend so much. So for instance, I'm actually taking my daughter with me to San Francisco next week, and I have a board meeting, and logistically I've set it up so that she has a play date with my partner's daughter during the board meeting. But it's just like you got to embrace the chaos, I think, when we're in my stage of venture. For earlier in your career in venture, I don't think I was good at this. I think I started to see how a partner's day is usually just like jam-packed, and then even the things you don't see on the calendar, you're usually someone's calling a founder, calling a reference in between. Like it really is just so packed that when you're an analyst or associate, I think you can start to build some really strong habits on time management and spending time. And I think those can be everything from weekly to sort of a quarter. Like over the sense of a quarter, are you going to try and go really deep in a sector and take as many pitches in that sector as possible? I've seen that work really well internally for our team, but also knowing that like in the reflection of the quarter, you're going to be like, there was this thing I had no idea was going to take up most of my quarter. So it's really unpredictable, but I think that's a good habit to get into, is sort of thinking about those
Yeah.
short-term cycles and those long-term cycles within venture.
Ooh, yeah, I love that. And you had mentioned a little bit about how almost like the nature of the job changes as you get closer to partner and then you become partner. Do you feel the same way about how success is different from being a young VC to being a partner? As in, for example, like the currency of that we work in is just getting deals done. As an analyst or an associate, like you're not really writing the checks. Like you're not getting the deals done per se at a lot of big firms, at least it feels like. Does the path to success change as you're in VC longer?
Um, Definitely, though I actually disagree with the currency of like what makes you successful when you're young. And I know Ross actually mentioned this on your show. But I do think figuring out what the firm does well is a really important
I was
thing.
hoping you'd say this. Yeah.
I know, right? He's got some good lines, that guy. But I also think like developing your own self, because if this industry is full of consensus thinkers and contrarian thinkers, like you've got to be able to do what the firm does well, but I think you also have to develop your own taste in venture. Anecdotally, the best outcomes tend to come from things that 30 people said no to, but this one person was like, I think you're great. And that's a crazy idea. I mean, my career has been, especially coming from the chief of staff orientation, like so much of that was like, you win when the partner wins. I think it can be dangerous of like, you just want to get a deal done. If we're going back to that metaphor of short cycles and long cycles, the short cycles is getting deals done, right? Like you need to be active. We need to invest. That's the whole part of the job, is deploying capital into the right things. So you also have to be just making sure that you are a good picker. If you're early in your venture career, you probably have a few moves within venture, right? There are some firms that grow talent from within, for sure. I mean, XYZ is a type of place that we want to develop talent internally, but we also want to be cognizant to that people's next step in venture might be going back to operating first, or they might want to join a firm that does venture in a different style, right? A XYZ is very different from a box group. XYZ is like high ownership. Box group is lower ownership, more checks. But they're fantastic investors, and that style is both collaborative with an XYZ and also collaborative with the rest of the ecosystem. But I think you can learn a lot about developing your own taste also from being at different firms. So because at First Round and XYZ are have similarities, but are also very different. And I've appreciated sort of learning different styles of venture in my own career.
I want to double down on what it means to develop your own taste, because that's something that I personally really struggle with. And my solution as of now is like simply getting the reps in and talking to a ton of founders. But I think that there's no shortcut. Like, you definitely have to do that, but maybe there's a very efficient way while you're doing it to get a sense of your taste quicker. So how did you develop your own taste, and do you have any best practices for those who are in the same boat as me?
Yeah, I think one thing that was wonderful within First Round, and I think you've talked to a few First Round alums in on the show, was that there was a really good peer group there, and it was like former chief of staff, so like Ben Schmela at the GP, who's a partner at the GP, Megan Kelly at Threshold, Abdul Lee at Initialized, Chris Brown at Inspired, Molly Fowler from Dormer Fund, Courtney Bowie Lipkin, who's at Sousa. But like, we all sort of overlapped over different years. But we did have like our own spreadsheet of how we voted on partner meeting deals.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's so fun.
And our regretted passes. So like, I do think like, even if you're early in your career, I think you can even start sort of tracking your own thinking and how you would have deployed capital. But that was fun because like it was very collaborative too. You know, I wish I had a copy of that sheet still. So I'd say take the sheet with you, or print it out. That's one thing with taste, especially if like it's consensus driven decisioning inside your firm, and you need to learn the skill set of explaining an investment opportunity so everyone on that investment committee understands it, and also developing your own conviction in it is good. And doing postmortems on like when you're further in your career where you're like, I made this bet, I knew the risks, like the founder team is great, their product was like still figuring it out, and I had concerns around TAM. I think that like doing a postmortem if things don't work out, whether it's with yourself or with your partner or another member of the investment team, I think is just an important part of the process. Like, what did you learn from that investment? Both the goods and the bads, right? What's working? Why did it work? And then it didn't work. What could you have seen when you made the investment?
Right. Is there a deal that you passed or missed that still hurts?
Oh yes, always. There's everything. I think that's one thing too inside XYZ is we're really competitive, and we're also really hard on ourselves. I wanted to do the pre-seed investment in Thatch.
Yeah.
And they ended up just taking,
I
mean, I'm being very confessional here, but they ended up just taking money from friends and family for the pre-seed. But I really loved those founders and continue to love them, and they've been very successful. But that one always hurts when I see inside First Round too. We wanted Rob and I wanted to invest in Fair.
Ooh.
And
they're great. They're so fantastic.
Hurt.
That's so fantastic.
I just used to send Max, the founder, like an email like congratulations every time he raised his next round. So I just think like at the end of the day, in this ecosystem, you want everyone to be successful,
right?
Even the companies you pass on, or even the companies you miss. So I think those are actually categorically misses versus passes. It's great to see people kicking ass and taking names.
Wait, this is a perfect segue. I told you this in our intro call, but I lost a deal, my first deal. Like, I wanted to put an angel check in, and it's so funny when you first get into venture. You always think of it like Shark Tank. Like, everyone wants your money, right? But the reality of it is there are certain people that are very popular, and a lot of people have conviction that they're going to do something great, and you have to prove to them that your money is worth more than everyone else's money. And that was I'd always understood that, but I'd never actually been in the battlefield where I'm trying to get someone to take my money. And so it didn't work out. I lost my first deal. You mentioned earlier how you and the team at XYZ are super competitive.
Yes,
So
very
how
competitive.
how do you guys think about winning competitive deals? Any advice for me who is heartbroken that I lost my first one?
Um, I think we've all been there. And I think it's a good, I mean, talking about reflecting on everything too, it's just like, you know, was it a speed thing? Or was it like were you paying attention to the wrong thing in the moment in time, right? Like there's a lot of times where you look back at how you spent your time and you were like, was that the right thing at the right moment in time that I should have been spending time on? Um, but I think both Ross and I at XYZ, we really are just very transparent and very authentic people. We're very different. But we work incredibly well together. But we sort of win on reputation, which I think a lot of firms will say. But I think that as you progress in your career in venture, I think you have more people who want you to win. So the early days of making your first investment, um, you don't have like this like group of like 30 founders who all want you to win as much as you want them to win. So I think it actually gets easier to win even if it's crazy market conditions, which like I've been in venture 12 years and every time feels like it's a crazy market condition. So I think that is actually a constant. But I think that what I'm appreciating right now, and I have like a verbal offer out to a team right now, is that I can feel that all the founders I work with want me to win a deal as much as I want to win a deal. And I think that is something that like is what you want to achieve as a young investor. Just you want people to be in your court and want you to be as successful as much as you want to be successful yourself.
I see. This is gonna sound transactional, but how do you make that happen? It's just through like having high integrity and then being active with the founders that are in your circles.
I think, yeah, I steal this from Josh Koppelman from First Round, but he always explained sort of like the ethos at First Round was unvarnished feedback, unwavering support. And, if when you start a new fund, I think you take things from your old fund too. And that was something that we brought to XYZ. We use that phrase a ton within XYZ on unvarnished feedback, unwavering support. And I think that's how we support founders, where we believe it's our one job for them to raise more capital if we are investing in a venture scalable business. And so it is our job to tell them if what they are doing currently in this moment isn't going to unlock that next round of capital. So it's my job to be like, that's not going to be fundable in 6 months, because then someone has time to course correct and try something new. But we don't do this in a way that like, I think that we would be branded as assholes. I think we do this in a very like, we're in it with you, even though it's your blood, sweat, and tears that is going into this company. But like, we're here to be the sounding board, to help you sort of like right the ship. And lastly, I think what venture capitalists have expertise in often is venture. And so we also think it's our job to explain what the market wants from a company in that moment in time. So I think also like, even in negotiations with founders, I try to like be like, here's the pros and cons to a safe round versus a price round. Here's how I would reference this other investor. Because often especially if you're a first time founder, it's like it's the first time you're negotiating with a venture capitalist, but like figuring out where people are in their venture career journey, it's like I've probably now negotiated 20 deals, like versus Ross has probably negotiated, 60 in his
Yeah.
career. So, I don't like,
Yeah. Right.
but so, it's all nuanced. It's all bespoke, I think, to the person. I really take the frame. I really am of the mind of just like a lot people make or break a lot of these businesses, and a lot of times things just boil down to people problems. So as soon as you can establish a relationship of trust with founders, I think the more insight you have into how a company's operating, and the more comfortable a founder is coming to you with being like, my co-founder quit yesterday.
You talked a little bit about how to win, and that is the one thing that really stuck with me when I recorded with Ross, is he was really big on understand the unique way that you and your firm can win. What is your way? Like, what is the Chauncey way? And I know you mentioned a lot about trust and being there. I'd love to learn more about how it is that you win and how you found that.
I think a lot of the reflection I have is that get to conviction as quickly as possible. And so I think that goes back to time management. Like, is this a deal that like all your time should be going to? Because I find in the winning piece for me, like I have to do a whole lot of diligence to be like, this is the thing to do at this moment in time. So winning for me is developing conviction as quickly as possible. And then, because I think speed matters in the sense that like if you can be the first one to get conviction on a deal, like I think founders want, like what they're looking for is to being believed in. So I think that's been something for XYZ and myself that's actually been very unique of just like, how do you position yourself as quickly as possible to getting to conviction, and doing all the work to do that. And then on the other side of winning, it really is that like, if your reputation is really all you have in this job, I don't think there's any way to have a perfect reputation. There's going to be the founder that you totally forgot to close the loop with, but that is something you can aspire to never have happen, right? Because it is really something like you should not do. But as I try to think about it as like every meeting I have, I hope this person gets some value out of it, so that if they have a friend, they will refer them anyway to be like, you should talk to Chauncey.
You talked a lot about getting to conviction as quick as possible, reputation being really like at the core. When you strip everything away, that's all you got in this job. I've loved the framework, and I picked this up from the team at EDIAC out in New York. I'm not sure if you know them.
They're great.
But it's like the concept of like leaving founders better than when you first met them, like better at the end of the call than the beginning. And so whether it's through making an intro, even if you pass, finding some way to make them 1% better because they took the call with you. I've like loved that framework, and I've been trying to find ways to apply it. But as a young VC, gosh, it is hard to provide value. Like it's like, but I was talking to a few other people, and the best deals, like they're not going to have trouble raising from VCs, right? So if my value add is like, wow, like I run this podcast, I have access to 50 VCs, like that's not really a value add to them sometimes. So I'm rethinking what it means to provide value. Yeah. And that's what I think is interesting.
All money is green. And everyone in the ecosystem feels that. But I don't know. I like kind of disagree with you that every deal that's the deal to do is hot. So I think that some of the best returns in venture, when you hear the story of like how it was starting the company, it was not consensus. One of my favorite books, I think, for a young VC, and this may have been mentioned on your show before, may not, but is eBoys. So eBoys is the story of Benchmark's first fund. And when the founders of Benchmark started Benchmark, they agreed to have a reporter join every single partner meeting. And so it is like a tell-all of what it's like being inside a firm. And they were an upstart themselves. Like the partners came from other established firms. Well, why do you think? Because this book was written. I think it's a great book, but what it does is like, I think it goes through a lot of great investments. A lot of great investments like eBay. That's why it's called eBoys. And all the things that didn't work out, like Webvan. And so I think it's really illustrative of how do partnerships work? How do people make decisions? And then I also think it is like a good lesson on some of the, eBay actually didn't need money. Like they were already profitable, but they wanted the expertise. They wanted help, you know? And so I think like you can find your own unique set of value with founders, whether it's like you lean into being an advisor or more of a coach, or you the consummate networker, you just always have a guy that you can introduce someone to. Um, or you know, especially with like um starting your own podcast, like you have distribution, you have an audience, like you can help with downstream investor introduction. So I mean, I think there's always a way to position yourself that feels authentic and true to who you are. But I definitely highly recommend boys as
Yeah.
like a good insight into
Yeah.
sort of the inner workings of a fund.
Yeah. I guess I want to use that as a segue to talk about how you mentor the new associates, right? So the VC is so tough for me because it's a balancing game between signaling, pattern recognition, but pattern recognition on the right things. Also like following your mentors, but also trying to develop your own taste. So hard to pick between what is right and what's wrong, or what to follow, what not to follow. So I'm just throwing a bunch of my problems at you right now. So as someone who mentors the associates, do you have any thoughts or takes on what it means to be a good mentor?
um And you should ask them all if I'm a good mentor too, because like feedback is a gift. One thing that I think that someone told me early in my venture career, at the time, Megan Quinn, who was a partner at Spark, she's actually the COO of Niantic now. But uh, she's someone who paid it forward. Like she took a meeting with me when I had no business taking a meeting with her, but like, so you're always just sort of like grateful for the people who spend time with you when you're early in your career. But she was like talking about, she and her husband are actually both venture capitalists. Her husband's MG Siegler. And she kind of sort of did this great illustration of like the ways in which they both approach venture. So MG would love to spend his time reading all week, just going really deep on different topics, and becoming a subject matter expertise, and then taking 1 to 2 meetings based on that information. Megan is very different. Megan's like, I get energy from people, and I stack my days back to back to back, and like that's how I learn, is through talking to people. So I think when I'm talking to the earlier career investors, I like to say know thyself. So figure out who you are, because like if you're not a prolific Twitter Xer, you're not going. It sounds
I'm not, by the way.
terrible.
I actually
Yeah.
can't stand the platform. It's not for me.
I ebb and flow. I used to be a much bigger tweeter. I'm just gonna
We'll
this
go with that. We'll go with
this
Twitter.
is how you know you're like a boomer.
Yeah.
Approaching boomer stage. But I used to be much better at it when I was at Wired. But like you just got to do things that come naturally to you, and I just don't think you copy other people's playbooks. Now, I think that might go against a little bit of like figure out what the firm's done, but that's where that tension is like, okay, this is what an XYZ shaped deal looks like, and this is how you underwrite an XYZ shaped deal, and what we're looking for in diligence in order to get conviction. And so I think that the investors that are earlier career in our team are learning that, and they've learned it rapidly with velocity. Velocity is a word we use a lot internally at XYZ. And then I also encourage them to like, for their own opinions, their perspectives. And so I think that it's important also in mentorship to make sure that you're pushing people to share their opinions and make it feel like a comfortable place for them to tell you something, because, you know, mentioned this earlier, but I do think that venture is a young person's game in many ways, like more time to go to that happy hour, more time to go to that hackathon. And so I think that earlier career in venture, you have your fingers more on the pulse. Like
Yeah.
I don't
Totally
have
agree.
I don't have TikTok. I
Yeah.
don't I have no idea what goes on there. So
I keep
someone has to
forgetting
tell
that.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting that. Like, I just look up to so many people in the venture ecosystem, and I almost like take what they have to say as gospel. I just because I think they're so brilliant. But the one thing that they cannot see that I can see is I have feet on the ground with very young founders, right?
Yeah.
That's why I think Dormant Fund is such an amazing project and an amazing fun, really. But what are some common traps that you're seeing that the new associates fall into?
Mm, I
Or
think just
Mhm.
I don't think there's any common traps, but I'll just sort of reflect on my own career. Um is like it I do think it takes time. I think you need to see a fair amount, and um it's one of those things that if you want to be in venture for the next 20, 30 years, like um you in year 1 are you going to see like 200 deals, and then by year 4 have you seen 1,500 deals, like
Damn.
increasing that amount of companies you're looking at, and then you start seeing patterns of like, oh, a whole bunch of founders are thinking about functional medicine all of a sudden. And it's interesting to reflect on the different themes that come up, and then also uh just getting those reps in.
Yeah.
Um so I think that um one thing that I do push the team on is how much diligence can do you do, like what
Yeah.
is, because especially with Perplexity or
Yeah.
Google Deep Research, like everyone's got a competitive edge on like doing the research. What are the competitors? And so how do you get ahead of that? Like, how do you talk to someone who's actually a subject matter expert? And like, how do you bring that person into your network? Because that allows you to
Yeah.
go faster on decisioning.
Ooh. Yeah. Oh, that gives me a lot to think about. This is so helpful. Like, I'm having so much fun. When you look back at your own storied career so far, a lot of it is still left to be written. But so
Totally.
far, what are the moments that stand out to you? If I say the word highlights, is there something that comes to mind immediately?
Um, I mean, I've loved every moment of the journey. I think like um one thing that's like really for me was that when I joined XYZ, I was pregnant with my second child. And I knew I was pregnant with my second child. And I was like, okay, I've been at First Round forever. And at the time, I was working on Dorm Room Fund, which I know we haven't touched on, but is like
Oh,
such a
I know. I
wonderful
really want to
fund.
talk about that.
Uh,
Yeah.
and Molly's killing it. But I was like, I'm really happy here, but I want to see if I can do this. I want to see if I can write checks. And so because I'd been doing all the rest of the job supporting, but not actually doing it myself. And so I ran a really like rigorous process around talking to a bunch of venture capitalists, and someone who was really starting a firm. Like when I joined, Ross's LinkedIn profile was our website. And I think one of the highlights is being that risk on pregnant with my second child. And then the world shut down. It
Oh
was
my
COVID. We
gosh.
went right into COVID. So
Whoa.
I left First Round in March of 2020, never cleaned my desk out, and just joined Ross. And we were 3 people at the time, me, Ross, and his executive assistant. So I think that's like such a highlight, because now 5 years later, because I literally just hit 5 years at XYZ, I feel like we've learned a lot. We've backed so many amazing, incredible
Yeah.
founders who are
You guys
doing
are
such
killing
great
it.
things. Yeah, we're trying, but we're always just trying to make our parents proud and do a little bit better. so,
Yeah.
um, so I think that's like, I mean, that's really the highlight, is like actually betting on yourself, I think would be
Dude, yeah.
my advice for young people. Cause I think I started to bet on myself a little later in my career, because I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
So yeah.
On the opposite of highlights, though, is unfortunately low lights. So when I say the word low lights, is there a
Hmm.
moment or a time that sticks out? Because honestly, well,
Yeah.
even when you were taking the big swing on yourself, that's scary. It is so scary. You were having your second kid. Like, wow.
Going into a global recession.
Right.
Um, I there aren't many lowlights. I mean, I think maybe if like so young career, and Rob Hayes gave me this advice, was like he and I think it's pertinent to people in venture, but like it was actually when I was pregnant with my first child. He was like, you're not going to remember if you were at first round for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years at the end of the day. Like talking about career progression, he's like you have like life is long and you're going to be successful. And like his belief in me and sort of just giving perspective. And he's great. He's an incredible mentor. But I think that was like what I needed to hear at that moment in time. Cause like at that time, I think I was itching to do the next thing. And so I think you always kind of need to have that itch of like, I'm ready for what's next, but also, it's okay because you got to get those reps in too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's
Absolutely.
tension there for sure. So.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Chauncey, this has been so much fun. Unfortunately, though, our time has come to an end. After this,
too much fun. Yeah.
Too much fun. We got to have you on for a part 2.
Okay.
It's time for the ceremonial final ask. So
Let's
I have
do
3
it.
final questions for you. You ready?
Let's go.
So in the spirit of being new to venture, if you were to write a letter to your past self, right, as you were starting in this crazy, chaotic world of startups and VC, what would you write about?
I would encourage myself to have more confidence. I think that it was a very intimidating environment to go into. And I think I should have spoken up more because I think often I found myself like thinking something and then hearing someone else say something similar in the room. And I was like, well, I was thinking that. Why am I saying, and that's what I try to think about, creating an environment where early career investors feel comfortable to share their opinion. And it wasn't that maybe then it was just a new environment. So when you're the first, I think it's like can feel harder.
The next question for you today is to shout out a VC that you think has been absolutely killing the game recently. Maybe someone who had unique takes, wrote a fantastic article, or been along with you for the journey, personally helping you grow. Someone you reach out to for advice. Shout out that VC that means a lot to you.
Megan Kelly at Threshold shouted out so many of my favorite people. One additional first round alum who he and I started our venture career at the same time is Ben Shmela at the GP. And I think the world of him. I think he is so smart. I think he's just such a great partner to the founders he works with. And been fortunate to be like doing this job with him the whole time. So he's the best.
The last question for you today, Chauncey, is to shout out a startup that you think can change the world.
So the startup is Ordo, and they're franchising school lunches. So what they do is they win a contract with a school to service lunch and all sorts of different meals, and then they outsource that to a local caterer. So it's also like bringing those dollars back to the local economy, and they're crushing it. It's such a cool, unique idea, and that's what you love to see. And it's an amazing founding team. So I think you'll be hearing a lot more about them in the months to come.
This is the kind of bet that I love. Like no one really thinks about that industry, right? And it's so exciting. I'm sure the due diligence must have been very interesting for that deal. But congratulations. It sounds like they're doing great. What a cool product and an even better way to end the show. Chauncey, thank you so much for joining me on New to Venture. I'm looking forward to seeing all the amazing things that you will do. And if you're ever in New York, let me know. Coffee's on me.